In a village called Ardabau, on the edge of Phrygia, in what's now Turkey, a recent convert named Montanus fell into ecstasy, carried out of himself, no longer in charge of his own mouth, and began to prophesy. Israel's prophets carried God's own words, and stayed themselves while they carried them. This was something else. The man emptied out, the Spirit playing him. Behold, man is like a lyre, and I fly over him like a plectrum, the pick that strikes the strings. The man is the instrument, the player is God. When it began is genuinely disputed. One ancient writer says around 157, another 172. But what it became is not. History calls it Montanism, after its prophet. Its own people called it the new prophecy. The church weighed it and threw it out. And Tertullian, Christianity's first great Latin theologian, walked in. Two prophetesses stood with Montanus, Priscilla, and Maximilla, and the three spoke as the direct voice of the Holy Spirit. The helper Jesus had promised, the Paraclete who would guide his people into all truth. That promise, they said, was being kept through them. The movement's own writings are almost all lost. Most of what we know comes from its enemies, who reported that the prophetesses had abandoned their husbands. Maybe so, but enemies said it. The surviving record points to stricter fasting and marriage discipline. In Tertullian's Carthage, that rigor included no second marriages and no flight from persecution. The Spirit tightening the church's discipline because time was short. Maximilla said so outright. After me there will no longer be a prophet, but the end. And Montanus gave the end an address, renaming two small Phrygian towns, Pepuza and Timion, Jerusalem, where believers gathered to wait. The churches of Asia gathered too, council after council, to examine the new utterances, the earliest church assemblies on record since the apostles met at Jerusalem, and judged the prophecies profane and put the movement out. A treatise came back with the argument in its title, a prophet ought not to speak in ecstasy. When God spoke through Isaiah, Isaiah stayed Isaiah. However the Spirit works, they concluded, he does not empty a man and play him. And the end never came. Maximilla died around 179, the last of the three, and an opponent writing 13 years later could still say that no war had come and no end with it. Then Tertullian joined them. A convert in Carthage, he had published the Apology around 197, a defense of Christians addressed to Rome's magistrates. By about 207, he had embraced the new prophecy, not because he wanted less Christianity, because he wanted more. The church, as he saw it, had gone soft. Absolution handed out cheap and respectable reasons found for running. Righteousness, he wrote, had passed its infancy under the law and the prophets, and its youth under the gospel. Now through the Paraclete it is settling into maturity. He had watched a sister in his congregation receive visions during Sunday worship, reported and weighed after the service, and he believed her. And for Christians who wouldn't follow, he had a dismissive name, the natural ones, soul but no spirit. Did he ever formally leave the church? The sources won't settle it. Jerome, almost 2 centuries later, says he lapsed. Nothing in Tertullian's own pages records a break. 200 years on, Augustine knew a little group in Carthage called the Tertullianists, and received the last of them back into the church, building and all. In those same years, Tertullian wrote Against Praxeas, against a teacher who said the Father and the Son were one and the same. Praxeas, he wrote, had done the devil's work at Rome. He had got the bishop there to withdraw his recognition of the new prophecy. He put to flight the Paraclete, and he crucified the Father. In answering, Tertullian set down the grammar the Church has confessed ever since, one God in 3 persons, and he is the first Latin writer we have who uses the word Trinity at all. The Church's clearest early words for God came from a man standing with a condemned movement. When God gave the Church something lasting through Tertullian, it was Tertullian at full capacity, his learning, his temper, his Latin. But that is an observation about how God works, not the verdict on the new prophecy. The Apostle John had told the churches to test the spirits, and the councils did exactly that, weighing the new words, holding the prophets accountable for order, measuring what they said against the faith the apostles handed down. And Maximilla had staked everything on an end that never came. Montanism lingered in Phrygia for centuries, and around 550 the Emperor Justinian sent men to Pepuza, who opened the shrine where Montanus, Priscilla, and Maximilla lay, burned the bones, and pulled the sanctuary down. The destruction of the movement's central shrine, not of the movement itself. Adherents survived into the 8th century. That was the end the new prophecies Jerusalem got, not the end Maximilla promised. What survived was the word.